I'm Brian Carpenter, host of Fresh Air at 5, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful Monday evening, or it may be well into Tuesday morning, depending on where it is that you're joining us across the globe. But as always, I want to thank you for all of your support. Thank you so much for all the likes, the shares, the follows, the listens, the downloads, all the great messages. I really appreciate everything that you do. As you know, we do what we do for all of y'all, so we can go ahead and bring you some amazing conversations week in and week out, and of course with some amazing guests. And today, of course, is no exception. So I am excited to welcome today Mr. Devlin Daly, who's joining us. He is a co-founder or CEO of Derivita, and today we're going to be talking about this amazing math platform and what Derivita hopes to accomplish within the K-12 space and beyond, and of course, just the future of math education. So Devlin, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited that you're here. I know that we had scheduled this show a lot earlier, but of course, things happen. And now I'm glad that you're on the show today, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So before we dive right into the meat of it, Devlin, if you can go ahead and share just a little brief introduction about your work and your journey before we dive into all the good stuff that Derivita offers.
Okay, nice. Okay, well, I'll give you the scenic tour, and you can tell me if where I'm at with that. So, my training is actually in computer science. I did a master's in computer science at Brigham Young University, and my journey in EdTech actually started as a student, and using different technologies as a student, and actually even my frustrations of using EdTech as a student, right? When I was in grad school, I was interviewing with companies. I was trying to decide what I should do. I was married. I had kids actually. And, I was talking with my wife, where we should, interview and get jobs and whatnot. Or if we should think about maybe starting a company, right? It's kind of a dream for us technology guys, right? And I was in a class, and I actually took an entrepreneurship class. And there's actually only one other guy in the class, his name is Frank Whitmer. And part of the class is you're supposed to come up with a business idea and then go through the process of, what it would take to, see if it is a good idea, or, if it's viable, or, the entrepreneurship, like what we're learning to class, and apply it to one of your own ideas. And so, we got through a few lessons about how to do that. And basically, like all of the things we thought about doing, none of them would work out, right? They weren't big enough, or they weren't, they were only for a very select group of people, like nerds like us or something, right? So I remember an essay by Paul Graham, he's kind of famous now for Y Combinator. This was actually before Y Combinator, but he had an essay about, technologists, is that there's opportunities everywhere, and you just need to look for them. And his advice is just make a list of the software that you use every day that you don't like, the software that sucks, and then look at them. There's probably a business idea there. And so I went through this thought exercise, and top of the list was the learning management system we used as students, right? And it's okay. It was Blackboard. It's okay to say publicly now and all that. And so we're like, that's probably just what our school uses. And because we don't go to dozens of schools, right? So we just thought it was our school had made that choice. And so, I started this long journey, but essentially that was the impetus for creating Instructure in Canvas.
Oh, nice. All right. So Excellent. No, no, no. And don't worry about the length of it. The more that we get, the better, because again, like it's so important to make that connection with our audience members. But I love that you mentioned Blackboard because currently I am in a doctoral program and and throughout that doctoral program and even through my master's program, we're using Blackboard. And yeah, it's a very interesting, I think that, coming in from K-12, there's definitely a lot more options for, learning management systems that I think would be a little bit smoother and less clunkier. So, but that's besides the point. What I want to get at is I think it's something that is wonderful that you mentioned about this paper that you read and talking about making a list of, those products or those platforms that you really didn't like, and then maybe finding a solution or finding a business idea through that. And I am just very drawn by that because at this moment in time, being in education for 17 years now, and right now through the podcast, also, coming in actually from business and sales into education, now that entrepreneurial, edupreneur spirit is there, I'm like, wow, this is such an amazing story. And there's countless platforms that I get to see and I'm exposed to on the year to year and then the day to day that I'm like, yeah, we can do this would be a little bit better, do this would be a little bit better. So we'll definitely dive into that, but thank you so much for sharing that. And but before we dive in also into how Derivita got started, I want to ask you though, going into you said computer science and you majored in that, but was that something that you always knew you wanted to do, or did you have a different track in mind and then it just kind of led you to computer science?
Yeah, yeah, when I first went to college, I didn't have like a very specific one. I thought I would need to look at a few things. I think, when I took the standardized test, I said I was interested in business or in engineering or and things like that. But I didn't have like, I didn't go to college knowing like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And all right, so I know we're on a podcast, so not everyone can see me, but I'm of the age that the internet was not around. Right, I kind of grew up with the internet, right? And we had dial-up, at home, and then when I came to school, that was when I had like the first real access to the internet. And so it was actually in my first semester. College is so fantastic. I was taking a computer science class and I was taking a country western dance class, to meet people and whatnot. And I had a TA. He was actually the TA for both of them. He was the TA for country dancing, and he was the TA for this computer science class. And so I go from dance class and we walk back. And so he's like, "Hey, you want to check this out?" And he took me up to the not the freshman computer labs, but upstairs to the Unix labs. And he comes up there and he's like, "Actually, you have an account." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean? Like, what is?" And so he says, "Well, yeah, you just log in here and you do this." I'm like, "Do you have a webpage here?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" And so he, on the Unix machine, you actually have a home directory, you make a public HTML, you drop a file in it, and you have a website, right? And that like blew my mind. Like, wait, like anyone in, it's hard for, my kids to understand like how mind blowing that is. Of like, anyone in the world could look at this and I can control it. And I was hooked. Like that was it. It was over like that. And that's why, like, that's the path I kind of chose. It's because computer science is, the power of the internet, what it can do, and all the things that come along with that. But yeah, that was kind of the moment of, and then.
That's great. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And then of course, country western dance. That's interesting. Well, hey, you know what? For myself, going in my undergrad, it was Tai Chi. So I had Tai Chi. So that was my kinesiology credit. So, not quite country western dancing, but I can relate to one of those classes that's kind of a little out there. But hey, we just gotta get the credit, right? Well, Devlin, so let's talk a little bit more. I know that you mentioned Canvas and structure and so on, but of course, the meat of the matter today is Derivatives Blueprint for modern math learning. So tell us a little bit about how Derivita came to be and what problems or challenges are you hoping to address that many math teachers or math educators may be having through the power of Derivita?
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks for letting me kind of talk about Canvas, because that is actually the lens of how I got here. Okay, just a tiny bit with Canvas is Brian and I had some ideas of what we wanted to do, what we wanted as students, we wanted to be student champions, but then we actually went and talked to people and found out what was needed, and then kind of bringing some of the modern technology that we were learning, computer science and large scale distributed systems. I mean, like Canvas was the first learning management system that was native to the internet, right, to the web, right? That wasn't just each school running their own version of it. It's like there's one version, like we know, with all the major kind of web properties up to date. And so, we spent actually a lot of time validating what we were building, and then actually getting feedback from people before we built things, and then incorporating that, and then keeping that feedback loop, as we grew as a company. Okay. And so I was out, I met with schools all the time, and we're talking about, the issues that they're having, how Canvas could help with that, or in some ways how we couldn't help with that, right? And so I was traveling a lot with, actually I've traveled way too much, right? But we were talking with schools, and and mostly in higher ed, and this idea kept coming up of like, what are the main problems that they had? And it was math, even colleges and universities. And it was, a little surprising, because in, a lot of engineering courses, like people, they AP, or they skip into calculus and they go from there. And, and that actually is not the path that most people follow in college. Is that, and some of the stats are, like students aren't ready to take a college level math class when they go to college. It's something like 60% are not ready for it. And of the ones that are ready for it, then the pass rate is in like the mid 40 percentile, like 45% of students are ready. And so I guess to couch that, how I look at that is that with Canvas, the technology, and we were at the time we were getting purchased by like CIOs. They were just starting to get to the academic side that were actually making the decisions on that. And then as soon as you did, it's like the big problems they're having, it was math, right? The students weren't completing math. They were taking out loans. They were, working through school, and then like, well, college is not for me because I can't pass this math class. And then they would go off and have loans without any better, ability to, to earn in their careers from it because they hadn't finished their degree. And so looking at that, it's like, well, is there technology that can come and help with this? And so Canvas was the design Canvas to be like a great solution. We used to call it like the 80% solution. Is that what we did is that Canvas is, we weren't trying to be the best at every possible thing that we did, because we have discussion boards and assignment tools and, and portfolios and everything. But what it was is that it would work really well with each other, and you could basically use it without a whole lot of training. Right? It had to be so simple to use. But like, Power Rangers, like they would need something, much more, that could go deeper or more capable or something. And that's why we did a platform play at Canvas. So the idea is like, we didn't have to be the best at everything, but we were cohesive and worked so well together, and that somebody else could plug in and go really, really deep in a topic. And so when I, finding with these schools and talking about like, the things that they needed for math, is I was expecting somebody to come into Canvas and go really, really deep with math and plug that into Canvas, and it never happened. That actually was the impetus for creating Derivita. Is that I was seeing like there's these problems, these needs, there's these things that we need to help, to complete everything. It's not just about math majors. It's about math as a tool, to be good citizens, to get your degrees, and to that all the things that happen good from education. And the math is a component of that, but it is the stumbling block. So I thought if there was anything left where you could actually improve math completion, you could actually turn the needle on college completion, right? And so it's like, well, but that's the thing that I think I could help with, right? And so then going back to like to Derivita is, well, instead of just like copying what was there, is actually looking is like, well, what is there and why isn't it enough? Okay. And so looked at, and higher ed, it's all, the publishers, and they started out with textbooks, and then they went to like these little course codes and these little quiz engines, and found out essentially is that they were doing math content and questions for people to practice, do their homeworks, and the formative assessment, like where they're actively learning the topic, but they were using something that didn't understand what was being taught. So, and I guess this is like kind of the part is it Canvas actually falls under this category too, is that you have a multiple choice question, and the question doesn't know if it's asking a history question, it doesn't know if it's asking a math question, it just knows like ABC. We're going to fill in the blank, it just knows like, well, is the student going to give me a piece of text that matches what I'm looking for, right? And it doesn't understand that in math, it's like, I might do something like x divided by 2, but if the question is looking for 1/2 x, then those don't match as a piece of text. But if it understood the math that was being taught, it would be like, no, you're doing it right. Okay. And so, students were extremely frustrated. So with usability issues like that. So, and then when I went digging into it, I found that like the teachers were frustrated too, because they were only able to ask like low-level questions, right? They just, have a very specific answer, right? There's only like one way to do it. And that's the only thing that it could handle. And so, and then the students were getting frustrated just using technology, and they're fighting this technology more than the subject, right? And so it's that kind of combination of all of that is, they weren't able to ask questions that were worth asking. They were asking too low-level questions. You couldn't get enough questions to get good practice. The questions weren't usable, and all that feedback from it. So what I found was that it's a really hard problem, and that's why no one had done it before. Okay, and looking back as what do students need here that teachers are after, and so one is like fix the usability, right, and questions worth asking. But then there's like the broader question that was like to be candid here as well, is that today, like with other systems, when you assign like a math homework, you're essentially giving a test. There is no such thing as a homework because the students only have one chance. It's like, well, I didn't do it right. Well, can you try again? No, you can't, because there's no more questions, right? And it turns out that like that's other kind of the issues around that, right? So like a teacher, having questions enough so that students can practice, like mastery-based learning, right? Like, can I practice at it, get feedback on it, and then keep going until I do get it, right? And
Absolutely.
And so like there is this issue of like that. That's why publishers have an important role here, is because there's too much to build for a teacher to do it on their own, right? And so that's where like that does make sense, like a high quality designed item, that's kept up to date and supported and whatnot. But these item banks, they weren't large enough either, right? So essentially, Derivita is in response to all of that. Is how do we make something that is questions worth asking, right? That you're not going to run out of questions, that lets the students keep going until they get it, right? But then, and authentic math questions, right? And not just, rote and low-level skills. And then all the things about actually making this something that can actually kind of move the needle. So it means, it doesn't have business around it, right? It needs to be self-sustaining, that it delivers enough value that folks will use it, and that, can then fund future development and whatnot. And so in those, like, you have to meet people where they're at and, integrate with the learning management system so that everyone's in different courses and, getting data in the right places so that teachers can make decisions. And so like, I'm seeing all these issues. I'm like, okay, like, this is the one I'm going to bite off. Okay. It's really hard and no one had done it. Right. And so I went into I went to research mode. Right. And so this is great because I guess I should say here is that I actually left in structure. Right. So I built Canvas and that has been a huge success. And so I was able to, after I left, and I was able to take time to go and research this, right, and finding out what was needed and whatnot. And so it was just okay. So like, to give you a little example, like it was really hard. I understand why people didn't do it. Okay, so I'll tell you like what was hard about it. Okay, it is basically a language. Now in computers we have languages for programming, but there are a lot of assumptions that these languages make that aren't good assumptions. Assumptions for math. So a quick example is like like when you do like 2 + 3 or something in a programming language, it will automatically simplify that immediately because it thinks that you're trying to do a calculation. Whereas when you're trying to teach someone, you need to leave it unsimplified so I can give feedback on it and then have the option to have the computer calculate it for me. Okay, so that kind of makes sense.
Yes.
So like, someone does like X + 3 + 5. In other languages, you might get an X + 8. You'll never see that those terms were separate, right? And so fundamentally, like the programming language itself wasn't able to do it. So we had to build our own programming language, okay? And one that would actually, kind of respect that part of math, right? That we give students answers as is, but then we can evaluate them in both the raw form and in a simplified form too. And then because it needs to actually understand the math, we had to embed a symbolic computer algebra system into that language. And so in the end, is like we can actually ask open-ended math questions and still auto-grade them. Okay? And then give dynamic feedback to the student because that can actually take their answer and reflect it back to them. Right? And then there's some other secret sauce that we have here, and I will tell you, but the secret sauce is that we can actually show them step by step how to do the exact problem they're looking at. Okay, so one is like, so basically every item now is essentially its own program. It's a piece of code that knows how to randomize itself so that every variation is about the same level of difficulty. And then it gives dynamic feedback on the student to like, it's not just like a hint, like think about this as like, it's targeted. We can say like, that coefficient is not right and give very specific, feedback on that. And then after, if they're not getting it or whatnot, then we actually show them, okay, this is actually one way that you could have done it and how to think about that. And then immediately it says, try again. It's not like, well, you're done, right? It's try again and try a similar problem. And then it re-randomizes and goes again. So the students can keep going. So they never run out of items, right? And so it's like, the ultimate in mastery-based learning, right? Formative assessment is that you have to do that. And then now to get enough items, even with those items, like it's a complicated type. And so we actually had to build tools so that our team could build those questions much faster than has ever been been made, right? So like essentially like everyone else had like one or two advanced question types. We had to make that the default question type. So every question had to be that advanced. And so in order to do that, we had to build our own integrated development environment. So, and with our, that leverages our language so that, it'll help with the randomization and that, and you had types of math and you had to go really, we had to build tools. Otherwise it would have been impossible to build enough content to do it. Wow. So it's like, in the end though, this is what's amazing is that the idea is at the end, students don't even know that all that infrastructure is there. Is that they just are, interfacing directly with the topic, what they're trying to learn. Technology is getting out of the way. They're working out the solutions on paper is actually the ideal, because that's a tool for them. And then because we found that having them show step by step, we can only do that a few times because it's too slow. It's too onerous for the student. They're finding this technology more. So it's like, let's take the answer and actually do really, really intelligent things with that and only break down into step by step if we absolutely need to. And so to a student, it's almost transparent. Is they put in our answers. What if they, like it understood, like they said, like the 1/2 x or x divided by 2, or what if they had like a minus in the parentheses? Did they need to shoot that minus out? Like our platform understands that natively. So the student is just getting feedback, just in that zone, right, in the flow of that learning process, and then keep going until you get it. And then, but then surfacing that information to their teacher, right? Which we think is the biggest asset that student has. Right? So, I don't know.
No, absolutely. Like you hit on it is amazing because Devlin, I was like, I can easily just end the podcast here and say, hey, thank you so much for joining, because you answered a lot of the questions. But more than anything, it just seemed like everything that you answered, Devlin, everything has been one of the biggest pain points for me in the last 17 years as a math teacher, K through 12, at least actually 9th grade high school teacher algebra, and then moving down to elementary and doing 5th and 6th, and then of course working with our content specialist K through 12 and going platform through platform through platform. you hit on so many of those pain points that okay, let's start from the beginning. Number one, yes, college, it was a lot of remedial algebra. I had a lot of friends that were taking remedial algebra, even though they did very well in high school, but then they would have to take that course because they were doing very bad once they got into college algebra. It
Yeah.
was like a huge disconnect. So I hear you. But back in the day here at our university, we didn't really have like any kind of computer system. It's like you show up to a 45-minute class that you're still paying full tuition for just so you can get that remedial. And then you just, hey, as long as you get 100 in the class, then you're out. And so then you're losing kind of money and, of course,
Yeah.
that tuition. And then just so you can get into college algebra and then you move on from there. So you hit on a lot of great points where it was very frustrating where a lot of friends of mine had to go to tutoring and they're there fighting, they're just very disgruntled, they're discouraged. And there was a lot of what you mentioned that I saw that a lot of my friends dropped out saying, "Oh, I'll just come back, next semester." And then next semester came, and then the following semester, and the following semester. And then some of them just never came back. So I do agree with you to that extent of, we want a successful student that can definitely help, continue their pathway towards success and towards college graduation. So that's wonderful that you mentioned. The next thing that you mentioned that I absolutely love is how you thought about this problem, the solutions that you were bringing in, more than anything, in trying to make the tech not be, I don't want to say invisible, but just not the primary actor within the learning experience, I should say. And that's one thing that I love because the platforms that I have seen, the platforms that we currently use, you mentioned a couple of things. Number one, they are pretty much, they turn into assessments because once the student turns it in, that's it. Like it's turned in, they can't redo it unless the teacher says like, "Hey, let me give you one more chance." And then that's on the teacher side. And then of course, the more, for me, it's always taking things off a teacher's plate. So if there was something responsive like you are mentioning, where the student can continually practice and practice, and then more than anything, that data that is immediate, not only for the student to get the feedback, but for the teacher, that is something that is very powerful because there's a program that we use, and there's the teacher side of it where if a teacher wants to assign something specific, if they determine that there's an area of weakness and they would love to create something for their student for a tier 2 or a tier 3 approach, they don't have something that's called like, an assignment builder. Well, they have an assignment builder, but the actual item bank is under assessment. And one of the things that was a struggle with this platform last year was that teachers saw that name, it's called Assessment Builder. But I said, no, no, I know it says assessment, but I don't want you to think it's only for assessments. Here you can create, that additional support that you may need for your students. But there's just something about that word, Devlin. There's something about that word that deterred our teachers from saying, no, 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 I can't use that because I'm not giving an assessment. And I said, I understand. I was like, you don't even have to name it assessment. You can name, the title could say practice worksheet. They're like, no, no, no. It says assessment. Okay. So there's that. But also the assessment bank was very limited too as well. Now, because of the state of Texas from last year to this year, they've made some changes to that assessment bank, which are pretty decent. We're now, because here in the state of Texas now, students have to use a lot of drag and drop. They use a lot of text entry, hotspots, and so on and so forth. So they've accommodated that. However, it's very few questions that are there, and it could sometimes be just one or two per teak that the students are going through, and that's just not enough. And teachers are wanting more practice. So, because teachers want more practice, now the content specialists have to go in and create within our platform that we use so we can create these data point assessments. But even then, that test bank is limited.
Yeah.
So, right now, with what you shared with me about Derivita, I'm just blown away the fact that it's pretty much essentially a never ending item bank, or at least, and what I love is that you mentioned like it keeps the tests, or excuse me, not the tests, but the items very similar
Yeah.
as far as the student going through and maybe that additional support, kind of changing the level of rigor here and there and so on. But it seems like it's a great build up process. And then at the end, I think one of my favorite parts was like we talked about that the the platform is not the star of the show. The whole point is to elevate that learning experience for the student. And so right now I'm just really in awe and blown away that there is something like Derivita out there, and I am just now hearing about it. So I want to ask, is Derivita right now just for higher education, or is Derivita something that is K-12 and higher education?
It is K-12 and higher education.
Okay,
Okay.
excellent.
And how that came about was, we did start out in higher ed, and I was essentially kind of following a very similar model that I did at Structure with Canvas. You started out in higher ed, but our fourth client was in K-12 in Structure, right? And doing quite a bit in K-12. But so in Derivita, like I knew I was going to be doing K-12, but honestly, it happened so much sooner than I was anticipating. And it turns out that like a lot of the things that we were making, I wasn't sure how applicable it was going to be in K-12, and it turns out like we made like all the right decisions. And I mean, so like one is like, as a college professor, a lot of them they work on their own. And so we needed a very simple and a very, very quick way for them to configure it inside their learning management system. And so like that was the right call, because like at a school district, you might have, 80 schools in a district, right? And 50,000 students. Like how do you get that turned on for everyone simultaneously? Because we focus so much on like making it so easy to adopt, like that actual process turned on for the entire district is about 3 minutes. Turn on once and it's on for everybody, right? And that's like, and that integration is like, it's deep, right? We get, rosters and student names. We get, the assignments. We actually let you build assignments and formatives right within your LMS. And then like, we take care of all like any grades to your grade book if like you don't ever have to do that again, right? And tracking like your state standards, like that's all in there. So when I say like, it's okay, there are a couple of things. I like to pick a few, right? We started in higher ed, but then K-12 is we actually, there was this thing that happened with COVID where people were just, grabbing, they just needed anything. And we were not actually doing stuff at K-12 then. So we actually weren't a part of that kind of, I don't want to call it that kind of frenzy, because a lot of companies got a really big boost. We did not benefit from that at all, actually. But during COVID was when K-12 schools were like, well, where have you been? Like, why aren't you guys here? And a lot of really interesting parts is that the subject coverage is actually the same. And I hadn't realized this because like you said, like your friend, their college algebra is most similar to like a pre-calculus class in high school. And if you're not ready for it, right, then you have like those remedial courses. Well, some of those remedial courses will bring in topics out from like beginning algebra. I mean, so they're pulling in like 8th grade and up essentially. And 8th grade to calculus is the same coverage as K-12, right, in middle school and high school, right? And so we found that we were actually much more prepared for K-12 than we had realized. And okay, I'm going to say something controversial. It's okay, right? It is, I worked with some of the elite universities in the world, and I love them. They're amazing, but a lot of them, their students aren't coming in at like the college algebras either. So the math education they're not the forefront or doing the most innovative parts in math learning and math education. I find that even in higher ed, it's the community colleges and the 2-year schools that are doing the most innovation in there. And I find that it's even more innovation in K-12, right? Because a lot of times, in higher ed, math is just a requirement to go do something else, where in K-12, it is one of the main events, right? And everyone takes a math class every year, right? And so I find the pace of innovation just And we're like, we'll build things in K-12, and like we find out like everyone wants it, even in the college as well, right? So I say we do both, but we are primarily K-12 now. It has grown so much. It's to the point of like 90% of our business is in K-12. Okay. So you're asking about that. Is it K-12? Is it higher ed? It is both. And which is nice. So we actually, we even have a partner where we're working in elementary, right? In K-5 with the Math Learning Center and the Bridges curriculum. And then we have middle school and up with the Derivita courseware, right? And
Nice.
And there's no limit, right? So we have some schools that are teaching Cal 2, even Cal 3. Well, we have questions for those. And we can go with it. Okay.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. Now, let me ask you, okay, so since you are working with a lot of districts, do you really take into account and work with, and the only reason I ask this is because many platforms that are out there that work math, I won't mention any of their names because we use them, but sometimes they're not standards aligned. And one thing that I have learned about working in education here for 17 years in Texas is if you're not standards aligned, you're not going to get your foot in the door at a district, because that's the thing that they look for. So, and I'm just asking and throwing it out there, as far as Texas is concerned, would Derivita be something that could definitely be a solution for a district to be based on your offerings? Do you have standards aligned curriculum for this state?
Yes, the answer is absolutely right. And it's not just Texas either. It's all the different state standards that we align with that. And so it like you say, it is okay. So part of Derivita is that we are problem solvers, right? And so we look at what are the issues that math teachers have, right? Like, I need more questions. I need, more practice. I need information, right? And all those things. And so, essentially, is Derivita is response to solve those issues. Like you say, is like if you're at a district level and they need like state standards and alignments, like TEKS or in other states, we have solved that, and we've solved that in a very elegant way, right? So that it's not a bunch of effort. It's easy to use. It just it just works and gets out of the way so you can do the things you need to do. And the things that, right, sometimes it's like, there's the like, well, you have to do this and check the box to get in, but it's also like, why is the district asking about this? And it's because, actually standards is a way of master-based learning, right? It's saying like, this is what you should know, and like, keep going until you get it, right? And this is where you can be at, right? And it's appropriate for the grade level, for the students, and that mentality is exactly, it is right in line. That's great education, right? And then, how do you get a high quality curriculum? So like Derivita does not make the curriculum. Okay, so I guess that's part of the thing to differentiate here is that, curriculum, and I guess this, kind of go back to what I said earlier is like Canvas is a technology only, right? Like it lets you build a quiz, but you have to make each question yourself. It lets you put content, but you have to write the content and make it, and it will deliver it for you. And on the other side, you have like a curriculum that could be, paper-based, or, it could be digital, and it's just content. And then in the middle is like what I call courseware. And that is, it has a little mix of content and it has a mix of technology. And the best kind of courseware is that the technology understands the content that it's actually teaching or assessing. Okay. And so that's where Derivita falls. And so what we do is we have these, it's not, we need a new name because I can't call it an item bank because, it's not just like a multiple choice question, like in a normal item bank. It's like, it's a dynamic instrument, right? That's helping students learn, right? But we take those and then we align them with the standards so we can also align them with your curriculum.
Nice.
Right. So you go with both. And the idea is like, teachers, I love you, right? And it's our love letter to you, right?
Yes.
It's because, there's so much that is being required of the teachers. It's like, oh, go, because I know what it takes to now build like an Algebra 1 course, like how much practice you actually need. And you actually need, for your own course, between, like 12,000 items, even the ones that auto-generate, right? And with different organizations, just so that, like you said, it's not like one question on the standard. It's like can I get a few standards? Is it going to map with my curriculum? And so, and then you just need some practice, right? In that. And so like asking a teacher to do that, it's way too much, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we come in. So we don't do the curriculum. We will align with any curriculum that you're using, and then we align with the standards, and then that actually works out fantastically well.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things that we do well in our district is that we align our curriculum, and then we always look for those platforms that can align with what we have built, and it works out pretty well. However, just what you're describing though is that one of the huge pain points for a lot of teachers are like, well, I want my students to practice this skill more, but then we have a limited in what we call an item bank because what we have is truly an item bank because it's really very limited. But I love what you said for as far as Derivita is a dynamic learning bank or a dynamic learning center or just something that's there. And I love the way that you put that because now you can see similar type questions in very different formats, but still that are aligned to what that student needs or what is being covered in the curriculum. So, Devlin, as we kind of start, slowly wrapping up a little bit, couple of things that I want to ask as far as actionable assessments. Tell us a little bit about that because I know for our educators or teachers out there, they want to know, okay, does this have reporting, which I know we talked a little bit about right now as far as reporting for the students, reporting for the teachers as well. But let's talk about these actionable assessments, the feature that Derivita has available, and how does this empower educators and to help them make informed decisions?
Yeah, I mean, so a little bit earlier you talked about assessments, right? And it was thought of like that's an exam or a summative assessment or whatnot. Okay, so what I have found even with at Derivita and through my experiences is that it's really easy to go from a system that does formative assessment to summative because basically you just kind of turn things off, right? You turn off the number of attempts or the number of randomizations or turn off feedback, right? And then we just I just need to measure how are students understanding this today, right this moment, and I need to know that information. So, but you can't go the other way, and that's what everyone else has tried, and it doesn't work. That's why we ended up, giving exams as homework, right? Is because you can't take a summative engine and then try to tack on to make it formative, okay? And what I found is it's a spectrum, okay? And so, we talk about homework's formative assessment. You give, quizzes and exams in a summative sense to measure where students are at today. You might have a benchmark, that the district is trying to, get some information so they know where to, do we have gaps in our curriculum? Do we have math coaches? We have resources that we can help, and where do we put them, right? But even but as you actually think about it, it's actually, and people on the podcast can see I'm waving my hand all around here because it's a spectrum, right? And you go from is there actually that much of a difference between a benchmark and an exam in your class or even a homework? It's well, they're a little bit different, right? But they all should be giving that information. But if they're all standards aligned, if they're, on target, aligned with curriculum, all those things, it's they shouldn't be that different. It's just it's the frequency and whatnot you're giving it. And even to the other side of it is what about when you're in class? And and you look and it's not well, yeah, everyone got an 80% on the homework last night. Okay, I guess it's good to go. It's or did everyone have an issue with question 3 and that there isn't error in coverage and you just don't know it, right? And we could just talk about it, right as we're in the learning piece of it. So what I found is that with Derivita is we're actually trying to when we say assessment, we actually mean the entire spectrum. And so, I talked a lot about today about, homeworks, right? And that formative assessment, and then we have exams, right? So you can do summative and the actual assessments is kind of some things we talk about, we can deliver benchmarks, but we also go the other way completely is even in class to have something ephemeral, like a classroom response, we call ours spot check. Okay. So literally, like when you give any assessment, whether that be a homework or a benchmark, and you use that as a learning activity with your students, you can see the question and then push that question to every student's device in real time. And then as students are responding to it, it shows up on the projector on your computer in real time without names, without saying if they're right or wrong. So you can actually have like productive math discussions in your classroom. But it's low friction. You've already decided that these questions were worth asking because you put them on a homework, and you literally click one button and you're engaged in a math discussion in your classroom. And so when we feel like actionable assessments, we're actually talking about that whole thing. Okay, is I give a homework, and now we reflect back like, okay, these are parts or areas of uncovered, or problems that students struggled with. And then what are you going to do about it? What's the action? And so, well, one is like you could incorporate it into a spiral review, or you could go the other way, like, let's talk about it like right this second and do it in class, right? Take action about, with that assessment, right? But thinking about assessment in that broad sense of, very formative, very, very early, right? And if you look at it with that lens, that everything is on the spectrum, and that a single platform could actually go all the way from in class, tying your curriculum to your in-class instruction, to your homework, quizzes, exams, to your, formative assessment, your summative assessment, all the way into your benchmarks. And a single platform tying all those together is that they really should be just different views of the same thing, right? And like benchmarks don't typically work because it's a system that you don't use it. So why don't you use a system that's used every single day? And that's what you use to deliver a benchmark. And then you can actually get data that's you get worthwhile data. You actually get real data, right? And so we surface that data. So when we say actionable assessments we're actually kicking off an incredible amount of the right useful data. So what I mean by that, and we're getting closer, is the data itself. But then because you're asking an open-ended question, like a multiple choice question, is like, oh, everyone, they chose the wrong answer. It was C. Like, well, you don't know why. But if you say like, give me a function, any function that is linear or that has a positive slope, and we can still auto assess that. But then after the fact, you can see, well, what are the students actually, what were the misconceptions? Because we actually have their answer is not the translation of their answer into ABCD, right? And then what do you do about it, right? Like, can you lift that into something actual in your class? Can you differentiate for the group of students? Yeah, if you have an unlimited bank and an easy way to create these assessments or these assignments or like that support for that, can I bring it to my whole class? And answer absolutely. So when we talk about Derivita, part of it is just described that we do things much differently, but it's where everyone wants to be going, right? It's that assessment isn't something that you do or something that happens to you. It actually should be a part of the learning process, and taking action on that, and using that data to your advantage to help those students in their learning journey. And that's what Derivita is all about. That's what we're talking about, actual assessments.
And I love that what you said, because I know in my district we have what we call data point assessments, and those come every so often. I mean, it's something that's not continuous. I mean, essentially, it's like, okay, you're supposed to be working on this, and at the curricula at this given point in time, this is what should be covered. So while we're going to test that, it's like 15 questions on maybe what was covered that 6 weeks, or depending on the calendar. And then, of course, it comes, every so often. And then there's the benchmarks. But I feel like there's oftentimes a disconnect in that, because the benchmark is more to look like the state exam, as opposed to just something like you mentioned. Its assessment should be something that it doesn't happen to you. It's something that you do continually, and working on that. So this sets the students up for a whole other level of pressure. Even though it's a benchmark, they're already feeling that panic because you're shutting everything down and making it seem like it's a state exam. So I really love this approach, the way that you're talking about this, and the fact that you offer the dynamic questions, and and everything can be tailored to the curriculum that we have, as far as lining that up. And that's something that is important. And my last question to you before we wrap up with our final three questions is, and many educators out there may be wanting to know, does Derivita offer language supports for, various languages at this time?
Okay, that's a good question. This question is actually more controversial than I was expecting, right? Because a lot of different districts feel very strongly about it because, partly it is the state exams, right? Is the state exam going to be offered in a different language? And so there's like, you know, there's this kind of internal struggle with that. Like, do we help students like where they're at, right? And learn the material regardless of what language they speak, but is that going to prepare them for like things of how like the school's going to be evaluated later on the state exam? Those are really tricky, right? So I guess what we have decided to do at Derivita is the questions can actually be created in any language, like and the underlying math engine that's cool about math is like it translates really well. Right? It have borders, so the content could be in any language that you would like. But our item bank it is in English, and then we kind of embrace the web is one of our kind of mantras that, you don't have to install anything extra to make this work. We typeset math, work with the browser that you have. And so our strategy is that we actually work with the tools in the browser. So so anything that can translate, within the browser, then it will translate to Ribbon and it will work that way.
Perfect.
Is that
Excellent. Yeah, no. That works. That works. I know, like, usually, and I'll be honest with you, I know that that's one of the biggest things that, at least my experience in my district, that's what they look for. Like, does it offer the language supports and so on? And so maybe some do offer those embedded language supports. But one thing I will say is that I know that for a lot of the platforms that we've seen, that the Spanish component is always it's lacking in many of the platforms. And I get it. It's something that is just, that's the way it goes. However, what I do love that I don't think that a lot of the platforms that I have experience with that, they don't offer, the kind of that browser support, because I know exactly the tool, and we do have a tool in place within our district that does offer that additional support through browser-based tool, or it's actual extension that
Yeah.
can work very well. So we're very familiar with that. So that works. So that's really good to know, and again, and the only reason I ask that is just because, like I mentioned, that's one of the main questions that always gets asked within our
Yeah.
district and through my
No,
experience.
no,
But yeah.
yeah, it is important. I mean, the other questions are on like accessibility, right? And making the math accessible. Is that an image? Can it scale? And it's not just about blindness. It's about, like impairment or motor impairment. I mean, there's so many things that go into that is so important, that we spend a lot of time and effort working on that. The nice part is that it's a lot of accessibility work, and like that makes it available to these other tools, like even like translation tools. And so it's the part is like where Derivita can really contribute. There's this little spot here about like math education, and Derivita is like pressing hard in it, right? But like these other places, like there's other tools that will leverage that the students have. Like for example, translation is something they're going to need in more than just math.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we embrace that kind of, the web itself, so that those technologies can come in and translate for it, because those are the same tools that they're going to be using in other subject areas, right? Just like you would with like a screen reader or something like that, or contrast is like, that's not specific to math. So they can use the tools and bring their own tools with them that they already know and are effective with.
Absolutely. And I agree with you on that. That's wonderful. Well, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation, Devlin. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing the work that you're doing through Derivita, and obviously the great story on what led to Derivita. Thank you so much for giving us a lot of detail in that backstory. And, we definitely actually, I loved this conversation, being just a math guy, and just, you answered so many questions that I'm thinking to myself, hey, I think this is something that I need to kind of draw the attention to, of our district, because we're always looking for, obviously, improvement, but we want always looking for a platform that is going to be very, like we mentioned, actionable, in that sense that we're going to get information just in time. But more than anything, you mentioned that dynamic bank or dynamic items that are available. I think that's so important, because right now a lot of the platforms, it's the same thing, that you're working with the skill, but it's the same type of question, and it doesn't quite change as much to kind of maybe help build and so on. So I'm definitely loving what you shared that Derivita is doing. So thank you so much, Devlin. I really appreciate your time this evening and this conversation. But before we go, I always love to end the show with the following three questions. And I know they were there in the Google Calendar. So hopefully you got a chance to check them out. But if you didn't, it's okay. No worries. That way we can get some really good, authentic answers. So we'll go ahead and start with question number one. So, Devlin, question number one. We know that every superhero has a weakness. And like as we know, Superman's weakness was kryptonite. So what I want to ask you is in the current state of education and what you see through your purview, through your experience, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite? What might give you that same feeling that Superman gets with kryptonite in education for you?
Oh, like, so what makes me feel weak?
Yeah.
What makes me feel weak? It is, I should have been better prepared with your questions. I knew they were coming, but I guess the weakness is it's still, I guess it's still like when I see teachers and the technology is not helping them, and for that they're, and I see that as well. Like with derivatives, like I go and watch people and I make sure like, ooh, that's not. I'm definitely not like thinking that derivative solves all math problems, right? I think it's a tool that the teacher uses, and when it's not appropriate, then not to use it. So, but I guess I guess my weakness is seeing that where the technology is actually making a teacher's job harder.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. That's wonderful because I think there is such a thing as tech burden or tech overload. And with after COVID, when all platforms were giving everything away, I mean, you've got educators that were just hooked on these apps. And then now there's so many that do the same thing, or, sometimes there's a duplication of efforts and they do the same thing, but then that one's got the one new button. But then it's like, well, does it really help your pedagogy? Or is it just because you just want to use it? So, there's a lot of stuff out there. So I completely know where you're coming from. All right. So, Devlin, question number two. All right. Question number two is the following. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
It's a good question. On a billboard, I don't know. I would either put like, I have math technology will travel, either that or just the teachers, we love you. I don't know. Cause I guess the part I did mention earlier is that I'm a father of five, and, and I still have kids, at all levels at school. And I and education, that's one of the great things about education and technology is like, because it is contributing good in every way. And I just am appreciative of teachers in our education system in general. I'm perpetually blown away and so grateful and perfectly grateful for it. So.
Love it. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's definitely a great message for teachers. So thank you so much. All right. And the last question, Devlin, is if you had to write a book tomorrow, what would it be about?
Write a book tomorrow?
Yeah.
I guess I'm supposed to be talking because this podcasting, I'm supposed to be quiet. But if I had to write a book tomorrow, I guess it would be interesting is I have maybe I think it would be about education technology. I guess I don't know if it's boring that way, but I think that there is so many kind of interesting things and trade-offs that you have to make and learnings that you do, because it's not just about the technology. It's not just about the pedagogy. It's not just about like how decisions are made within schools, and even how like budgets work and how to build a company around it. But it's all of them simultaneously. And so I think sometimes, like on the academic side, they don't realize how like the challenges you need to like building a company in the space and vice versa. And by being able to, like, having been in both worlds and both sides, it's like, yeah, I think, I don't know. I find it interesting.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great topic. I love it. I would definitely buy that book because like I said, I'm always looking to learn, and especially just with your journey and just this evening with everything that you've shared, I've definitely picked up some great knowledge nuggets, not only for myself, but I know that a lot of our audience members definitely found some gems here that they're going to sprinkle onto what they are already doing great. And obviously, also, everybody's going to go check out Derivita and just to see what that is all about. So, guys, thank you so much again for all of your support. Devlin, thank you so much for being here again. Wonderful conversation. I'm glad that we were able to make this happen. And really, honestly, just thank you just so much for being very genuine and just being very forward with your answers and just letting us know really just your passion. I mean, this is something that was very well thought out. And sometimes, like I mentioned to you, through my experience, what I have seen out there, it just seems like it's something that was either piecemealed or it was just kind of put together, or it was put together well and then it got bought out, and then after that it kind of didn't turn out to be what it used to be. And there's all of that out there, but I loved how you described Derivita in such a way, all the way from where it started to where it is now, the supports that are there, and it just seems like it's something that is very solid and very useful. So like I mentioned to you, it's definitely something that I'm going to be checking out more of and diving into more. So thank you so much for your time this evening. And again, a wonderful conversation. And for all our audience members, thank you so much. Those of you that were joining us on the live, or those of you that are going to check this out on the replay, thank you as always for making my EdTech life what it is today. We really appreciate all of your support. And I ask that you visit our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 244 wonderful episodes with educators, creators, entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs. We've got shows for everybody, and I guarantee that you'll definitely take some gems with you that you can go ahead and sprinkle onto what you're already doing great, and definitely sharpen that teacher tool belt. So again, as always, visit our website at myedtech.life. And if you would love to support our mission, visit our merch store, guys. Pick yourself up a sweater, a hat, all of that goes back to our show so we can bring you these amazing conversations week in and week out. So thank you as always from the bottom of my heart. And my friends, don't forget, until next time, stay techie.